This is a sad, sad day for NRL fantasy, the casual athlete community and podcasting on a whole. A hero's fallen. Our man Biz is no longer on Australian shores. He'll be landing in New York any moment now, and well, it actually won't change much at all. We're still going to keep Biz on the show. Look, he's a diehard fan. He's going to be in New York from now on, but he'll be joining from there, and it's not going to change anything. Don't worry about it. Saying that tonight, we have a huge episode. So, round 16, huge buy round. Look, Biz is busy with that move to New York right now, but he'll be back next week. As for now, we've got a bit of a shorter episode, straight to the point. So, raise your glass, or maybe it's a cup of coffee. It's probably the morning for you right now. Let's jump into buy, hold, sell. Look, as far as overall players are concerned, this is a massive week. This is a week where you're going to either make up ground or you're going to fall behind the pack. When we're looking at head-to-head players, there's a couple of moves that I recommend you make here, but you can probably be a bit more conservative than the overall players. So we'll have a look at both those things in this video. And look, without further ado, let's jump right into the buys section. So for buys, some pretty straightforward buys here to start off. Dylan Edwards is the first one. Look, he's not crazy. He's not a crazy option. He's not going to displace Tedesco for that Origin jersey. So you've got nothing to worry about there. And look, he does have the buy in round 19, but he does play this week in round 16 and also the important round 17 buy as well. So for Dylan Edwards, it's really simple. $696K is not a bargain for him. It's a bit cheaper than he was a few weeks ago, but you're paying near full price. The big upside there is that he is a guy who's been averaging 50 plus at wing fullback. And he's been very consistent at the position where we haven't had that consistency throughout the year. And you might have been looking at guys like Greg Marzu, for example, who just got dropped for missing the team bus, or James Tedesco, who was, out for the next few major buy rounds for Origin, has been inconsistent. Tom Trbojevic, he's been hot and cold. There's just not that consistent option. So Dylan Edwards is that guy. Scott Sorensen's the next one. Look, we talked about him a few weeks ago as a potential buy. $717K now is not a fantastic price for him. You're paying pretty close to full price there, but he is eligible for the middle and the edge role. He's just been in fantastic form. So we look at two things. I'll talk about this a lot today. We're looking at the eye test and we're looking at the fantasy stat test, basically. So for Scott Sorensen, he's playing great footy in real life, which means he's probably going to keep that spot. And then also he's scoring well in fantasy. He ran, I think it was about 250 meters last week against the Roosters, which was enormous for him. So look, for Scotty Sorensen, he's probably a guy you can plug in and you can rely on good scores from. If you got on him early, you're pretty stoked. But if you're getting on him now, not the worst little pod there that you can get into. Next guy here is Dan Gagai. And I've talked to a few people recently about their strategy going into the end of the year here. So if you're a coach that's in that conversation for maybe the top 500, maybe top 1,000, maybe you're even in the top 100, the question you need to ask yourself is, am I going for a strong finish here where I have a respectable ranking and I can tell my friends, hey, I finished 72nd or I finished 330th or whatever it is there? Or am I going for the win? Now, if you're going for the win, Dan Gagai might be a guy you look at here. So, look, $652K, it's a bit cheaper than what you were paying for him about a month ago, but it's still pretty pricey for a center, especially a guy who hasn't really proven that he can do this year after year. Saying that he's looking like he's going to do it this year, he's coming off a massive score. If I was in the conversation for that maybe 100 to 150th kind of area, I'd be looking at Dan Gagai just as a pod there. Look, it could blow up in your face. It could make you sort of tank down the rankings, but it could also be a massive booster for you. So looking at guys like that is definitely the play if you want to move up the rankings and grab a pod there. Saying that, if you do want that respectable ranking, some of these other guys are probably better options. Next one here is Kalen Ponga. And look, we talked a month ago about Ruben Garrick, and we'll talk about him soon too. But I was saying to buy him at $491K, at $500K. And that's when you want to be getting these wing fullbacks. So you want to get a guy who's on a bit of a downward form. A Jacob Karaz is in that price right now, for example. But for Kalen Ponga, look, he's bounced back a bit. He was around that 400 mark. He's 500 now, hitting some consistent form, though. He's going to be 600, 650K. You don't want to be buying Kalen Ponga for 650K. What you could be doing right now is looking at him at 500K. He's got this week and next week where he's playing.
He's eligible for half and wing fullback. Look, half is probably not that important to you. It might be if you've got Matt Burton, Nico Hynes, Cole Oapu. Maybe you might be lacking in the halves next week. So it actually might be really useful. But for Kellen Ponga, look, 500K is when you want to buy him. If you aren't buying Ponga this week, you probably shouldn't be buying him at all this year. So make that call right now. Do you believe Ponga enough to get him? Look, I think he's gotten past those concussion issues. I think his form's fantastic. I think Newcastle are a really good attacking side. He's going to have a lot of opportunities. So with Kellen Ponga, I think he's a hot buy this week. Last guy here is a bit crazy. It's Nelson Asofa-Solomona. And look, he's a guy I was looking at a few weeks ago. I got lucky in that he scored, I think it was 18 or 19 points that week. But then last week he posted a 64. So with the Asofa-Solomona, you've got that high upside with very low downside there. There's a lot of risk. He scores a bit like a wing fullback. Him and, I guess, Tavita Pangai Jr., they're sort of in this same camp where they're that bulldozing middle forward who, throws a lot of offloads but doesn't necessarily have that consistent work rate of a guy like Carrigan or Payne Haas or, even Jermaine Hopgood is quite explosive but also has that work rate. So for Asofa-Solomona, look, 537K, there's a lot of upside in that price. He could easily get to 750K at some point this year. He's had periods where he's been averaging sort of 50 plus, and it's not outside of the realm of possibilities that he does that again. He's running off Harry Grant typically, not this week, but in general. So there's a lot of chances for him to explode. Saying that, with Nelson Asofa-Solomona, you got to be ready for the fact that he did score a lot of points on the edge last week. So you could potentially say that he's relying on moving to the edge to score better, and he's not scoring as well in the middle. I don't think that's necessarily true. And look, 537K, he is an absolute wild card pod for an overall player. If you're a head-to-head player, you're probably not going to do it. Look, there is injury risk as well, but there is just so much upside in that if you want the dice roll, it's risky. It's risky. That's full disclaimer there, but it could potentially pan out for you. So he's the kind of guy I love to look at, but there's a reason why he's 200K cheaper than Scott Sorensen. Next group here is 5 guys, and we've added a new segment here with positional changes. So we're not going to do this every week, but there are 5 really important positional changes that happen this week. Some of these are covering just for buy rounds. Others are looking more permanent. So we'll talk about these here. First one is Ruben Garrick, and look, 633K. Again, listen to the casual athlete, you would have had him at 491K. So you would have saved yourself 140K. He's posted massive scores since then, a lot of 50s kind of scores. He posted that 104 last week, which is just enormous. So for Garrick, the move to center, wing to center there, he's only eligible for wing fullback right now in fantasy. He'll get that center eligibility soon. That's nice if you had Joey Manu and maybe you're swapping those guys around and you have a bit of fluidity with your back line there. For his scoring, though, look, his try scoring rates got to go down. Moving to center, it has to go down. I mean, he scored a lot of tries last week. He carved up the Dolphins. They looked terrible last week. But for Ruben Garrick, as a center, he's not going to score as many tries. He may have more involvement. He's definitely going to make more tackles. He looked like he was trying to free up that arm a lot for sort of the right-hand flick. Very Jamie Lyon-esque in the way he was playing footy. We know he's got a bit of a kicking game as well. There's a lot of skill there, and potentially being outside of Trey Evans and Olakau'atu is a nice spot to be as well, because Olakau'atu draws in 2 guys every time he runs the ball, and even whenever he runs a decoy. So Garrick's going to get a lot of nice opportunities, and then Jason Saab outside him is a fantastic finisher. So I could see the upside here. Look, if I didn't own Ruben Garrick, 633K, I think Gagai is a safer option, and they're about the same price. So I wouldn't be hopping on Garrick if I didn't have him. But for those of you who jumped on when we said to jump on, bravo, you've nailed it. You might have gotten onto Simonson instead, who we recommended as well. He posted a 50 last week, and he's plus 150K since we said to buy him too. Look, there's just been a lot of guys that we've been recommending that have been hitting recently, and Garrick is at the head of that pack. Next guy here is Ryan Matterson. Look, I think we did recommend to buy him about 2 months ago, and he got injured about a month ago. So there's one that didn't work out. But look, for Matto, 756K, the price is not that important. He's sort of floating around the same price for most of this year. The interesting thing here is that he's named to play in the halves this week, coming back from an injury. So, I mean, calf injuries are not the best. Calf injuries are not the best. Look,
I'll talk about two things first, or three things. First one is, would I buy Matto? Probably not, for this second reason. So the second thing is the injury, the calf injury. How worried are we about that? In general, I wouldn't be too worried about a calf injury for Matto playing in the middle. I'd be a little more worried on the edge where there's a bit more explosive movement, a bit more lateral movement. Playing in the halves, though, it's a position he's played in the past. He'll definitely do a good job. Can he stay fit, though? Can he stay fit in that position? Will he be comfortable? Will things be predictable? Look, he's playing with new back rowers. Matto probably would have thought about playing that position with Sean Lane and Isaiah Papali'i. So playing with Davey and Cartwright is a bit different. Like, it's just a new look team. He doesn't have Mitch Moses there to lean on, or Dylan Brown. It's Matto and Dejan Arce. Probably kicks the ball about 50%, maybe 40%, with Gutho chiming in a bit there as well. I don't think hands will kick too much. Look, for Matto, I'd skip, but it's just interesting to see him in the halves. And to be honest, I think he'll score great in the halves. I think when Matterson's on the field for 80 minutes, he's just a fantastic footy player. He's going to get his runs in. He's going to get his offloads in. He'll make some tackles. And outside of that, he'll just be an attacking threat. So when Matto sort of moves, good things tend to happen around him. So I think he'll be good, but probably wouldn't be buying him this week. That's just my feel in it. Next guy is Stafford Toa, and look, another guy who's moved into the halves. This feels less like an origin move, though, and more like a move that they're going to stick with for a bit. So Luke Brooks is out. He picked up an injury recently, and he won't be staying at the club long term as well, which is tricky because they got rid of Jackson Hastings last year, and they got Wakeham in there who's playing pretty good footy, but is he the future? Stafford Toa moves into the halves with Wakeham. It's probably more interesting for Wakeham, actually, because Brooks was the dominant kicker, and Wakeham was doing maybe 30% of the kicking before. So Wakeham probably picks up a lot of kicking. But what does it mean for Stafford Toa? I'm probably not buying Toa. Just, again, it's risky. I mean, 619K, he doesn't play next week either. So he plays around 16, but he doesn't play around 17. He's available at centre and wing fullback, which is nice. I think he'll score well in the halves position. I don't think he'll explode necessarily, but he just feels a bit. Look, this is a crazy comparison to make. Joey Manu moves from centre to 6 or to 1 and just gets his hands on the ball more and is so explosive. Now, look, Stafford Toa is not in Joey Manu's league at all, but when we look at their fantasy scoring profiles, those have been relatively similar this year, with Stafford Toa probably edging out Joey Manu when they're both at centre. So that's more what I'm leaning on here. And I'm just thinking, look, Stafford Toa, maybe he gets his hands on the ball more. Maybe he gets a chance to create more. It could work out really well. I personally think you have a week to see what happens. Just watch this week. Watch the game. Make sure you watch and see if he passes the eye test. Check out his involvement. Is he getting the ball a lot at first receiver, which is not great? Or is he getting it second? Probably not third receiver, because Buller is not going to chime in as that genuine playmaker. Is their attack looking anemic? Does Simpkins come in and does that hurt things? Check it out, and we'll talk about it in more depth next week, or probably the week after when Toa comes back for round 18. Johnny Bateman, so he's at Tigers too. Look, he was one of our buys of the week last year. 768K now, so you've lost a bit of money there if you're buying him now. He scored 65 last week without doing anything too crazy, which is just what you love to see. Now, in terms of positional change, he moved late to the lock position last week. We were talking about him, so we did some analysis actually and picked that he would play lock. There was some hints in the media, a little bit of play there last week, the week before, a very high tackle count. So Biz actually called that Bateman would be moving to lock. And, as always happens with business predictions, it came true. Bateman's now at lock. It just means a lot more tackles, a lot more hands on the ball. Probably doesn't hurt him that much in attacking stats because he wasn't getting great ball from the halves. He was just getting the ball where he wanted it, basically. And he's going to get the ball in those same positions. So for Bateman, look, 768K, it's a good price. It's a good price. He's a guy who could potentially be in that top 5 to 10 fantasy players at the end of the year. 768K, you do it. You do it. You make that move. I like him, but he does miss round 17. So just keep an eye on that. If you have too many Tigers, Bulldogs, and Sharks players, because they're the 3 teams that miss round 17, so that's Tigers, Bulldogs, Sharks, then you might not want to move on Bateman. You might want to swap one of them for Bateman. So keep that in mind. But look, I like the look of John Bateman. Last guy here is Jake Granville, and we talk about Granville way too much. Look, he's gotten lucky this week. If you're a Granville owner, you got lucky too, because Taumalolo came back and he's going to eat up that middle lock role. So what happened? Reece Robson got picked in the 14 jersey for the Blues, which is, yeah, it's something. It's something. If you're a Reece Robson owner, you're pretty upset because Damien Cook looked like the backup, and they were running Hynes in 14, and they've moved Hynes out and they brought Robson in. So sucks to be you. But yeah, if you're a Granville owner, you're probably going to get a good score from him. He's probably going to score well. He'll play in that hooker spot. There's probably not much to say about him back like the week after with backing up. I think Robson won't play that many minutes, so you probably get rid of Granville soon after that. But yeah, 417K, he's probably going to bump up in price again. He scored 55 in the last major buy round. He could do the same again this week, so congratulations to you. Next group here is the cash cows, and these guys are pretty exciting. We're going to rev up for these boys. So look, cash cows. There's some good ones here. There's some really good ones here. Look, I want to talk about each of these guys because first we've got 3 hookers, then we have 2 halves to talk about. I like a lot of them. So Jake Simpkin's the first one. Simpkin is 220K, and he scored 57 last week. Boom. That's proof of concept. Proof of concept. The man can score. He had a nice little try assist, but other than that, it was very sustainable in terms of his scoring profile. Look, 220K is nice. The risk is that De Silva is on the bench. So De Silva is a highly, highly touted hooker at the Tigers. Coming out of the Magpies there. Look, the guy's 18. So I'm look, without having watched heaps of De Silva, if you're a Tigers fan, let me know in the comments what you think of De Silva and whether he's that guy. I'm erring on the side of him probably not being a massive minute eater in this team. I think he's going to get some experience. There's a good chance he comes on for the last 20 minutes or comes on for a 20-minute period in the middle, but I just can't see him eating big minutes in the middle. I don't think it would be wise for the Tigers to do that with a young hooker at that age. So I think Simpkin's still going to get it done, but Simpkin misses round 17. So you could wait and see if you wanted to wait and see. Look, Abby Coruscant's out for about 6 weeks. So, I mean, after that bye, you'll still have 4 weeks left. Could be worthwhile. He's still going to be close to a cash out, but I don't mind Simpkin at all. Like, if you've got a trade and you need a guy for 220K, which I might this week, then go get Simpkin. Look, he's the starting hooker. He's minimum price. He's probably going to play 60 minutes. Yeah, I'm into it. I'm a big fan of it. So, no, go ahead. Next guy's Brendan Hands, and this is riskier. We talked about him last week a little bit offline, just because he came into the team for Josh Hodgson, who called the coach on game day at 10:30 saying, "Hey, mate, I've got a sore neck." So Brendan Hands got into the starting side. Look, 260K is a nice price. He hasn't had a great scoring profile when he's coming to the team. Played big minutes. It was 35 last week, which is neither here nor there. Look, Para's buys are really good, so that's the upside. Hodgson's neck injury is TBC. I know nothing about it. It sounds like it's soreness. It sounds like there's no clear timeline when he's going to come back. So if you're getting Brendan Hands, you're a brave man. You're a brave man. I mean, you're putting your hand in it this week. Look, he'll score well this week probably for you. He'll have to do a lot. He could maybe do some kicking. I don't know how much he's capable of that. And he's played in the halves a bit too. I don't mind it. And even when Hodgson comes back, maybe they slowly bring him back in. So yeah, Hands could be a good option. Like, you guaranteed that 80-minute hooker for this week. That's the upside there of him over a Jake Simpkin. But it could end very quickly, or it could drag out. So we'll see what happens. Look, both good options. Both good options for you as an overall player. If you're a head-to-head player, probably Simpkin's the better option. Jake Turpin's the next guy. And look, Turpin, we talked about him last week. I think it was 371K, 376K, something like that. Look, 433K now. So we said buy him last week. There's still time. There's still time. Look, he plays this week, and he doesn't miss next week either. So he plays the next 3 games in a row. 16, 17, 18. He misses 19. There's a chance Brendan's misses back for 20. So You're only getting 3 games. Look, it's a very low break even. There is some risk here, though. So with Jake Turpin, I want to talk about 2 things. And when you're a fantasy coach, you need to look at these 2 things. So first question is, how do the stats look? And look, the scores have been fantastic. I think last week he scored 62. He had 68 tackles and nothing else. So that stat profile, I mean, look, the other game he played, he had I was 55 tackles in 62 minutes. So his tackle rate is fantastic. Look, if he gets the minutes and he plays 60-plus minutes, he's going to average 50-plus just on tackles alone. So that's golden. We'll give him a big tick for that one. Saying that, when we look at the eye test, we have to ask the question, does it make sense taking my fantasy team out of this equation? Because a lot of fantasy coaches think, oh, he better keep his spot because he's scoring a lot of fantasy. Fantasy scores mean nothing for NRL coaches. So does Jake Turpin help the Roosters win? Last week, the Roosters lost 30-6 to the Panthers, and they were looking like they had no answers in attack. That's a bad sign. Last week, Jake Turpin ran for 0 meters and offered nothing in attack. 0 meters is an impressively low number, so that's a bad sign. We've also seen Sandon Smith elevated to the starting side. So Sandon, not Brandon, Sandon Smith is in the halves now. We see Drew Hutchison move back to the bench. I've seen Robbo before use Hutchison as that spark at hooker. So, I mean, there could be changes at the end of, the weekend then when the final team list is named. So we might see moves. But my feel on this is that we're not going to see Turpin play 80 minutes again. If I was Robinson, I probably wouldn't be playing Turpin 80 minutes. I just don't think he offers as much an attack in that time span. What I'd be saying is let's play him for 50 minutes and let's say, mate, do exactly what you're doing in defense. Fantastic work, but get on the front of the ball a bit more. Make a few runs, throw in a few of those show and goes. He's got some attacking ability, not excessive amounts, but he is a bit of a Reece Robson light in that he can throw that show and go. He has a nice ball in him every now and then. He sort of pushes up in support as well. So I'd be thinking that he's going to play a little more attack and less minutes this week. So at 433K with 3 weeks left, it might not be worthwhile. Bit of risk there. Next guy is Jack Cogger, and yeah, he's one I was high on last week, and everyone laughed about Jack Cogger. But look, he scored 48 with no attacking stats last week. Now, the no attacking stats is, I'm not forecasting that he has bulk attacking stats every week. He's not that player. He's not that player, but he is a half at Penrith. He's going to get some of those attacking stats. That's something you can factor in the future. Look, his kick meters weren't astronomically high either. He had a really high tackle count, actually, which is odd. They must run a lot of traffic at him. But yeah, it was a weird scoring profile, but 48 points with no attacking stats. I'll take that to the bank. At 398K now. Look, Cleary's back around 20, around 21. They have to buy around 19. Let's say you're only getting Cogger for 3 weeks, plus potentially one more at the end of the buy rounds. There's money in it. If you think he can keep that spot, then yeah, there's money in him. I don't mind Jack Cogger. If you need a half, especially, golden. I mean, you probably don't need a half though, because we're going to talk about these guys, but there's been a few guys who went pick for Origin who we thought might have been. And the last guy here is Sandon Smith. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I just don't trust these Roosters rotations. Look, Drew Hutch has been picked in the halves before. I wouldn't be picking him there in general, but he could easily come back in for Sandon Smith. We've also got Sam Walker, who, he's still out injured right now, but it's not a long-term injury. He could be back in the next couple of weeks. I just don't see it for Sandon Smith. And we've also had these games where he has not had many minutes, and he's scored low scores in low minutes. So his PPM has been fine. But it means his break-even's a little higher. So, we've seen guys like, we talked about Simpkin. He scored 57 last week. He's still 220K. That's because he had those low scores before, so it makes it harder to make some money. You want a guy who's scoring big from the jump there. So Sandon Smith, I'm skipping, but if you like the talent, then you like the talent, and it could work out for you. Next group here, we've got the holds, and look, I'll blast through these guys. Look, Luki is the first one here. Nanai got picked for Origin. That's what that's about. So if you got Luki and you held through last week, probably get a good score from him this week. Hold on one more week. Probably going to be selling him next week with Nanai. Unless Nanai doesn't back up, you might get one more week out of him. But yeah, hold on, see what happens. That Cowboys team is fragile, so maybe something happens for him. Next guy, Billy Smith. He comes back into the starting side. He was dropped out last week, 466K. He plays a major buy round. He plays next week as well. Hold on, see what happens. The Roosters just have not figured it out this year, but Billy Smith has been a bit of a shining light for them as far as fantasy scores go. Faux Crossland or Phoenix Crossland, next one here. He's been playing big minutes, between 67 and 80 minutes for the last month of footy. So he's not a great fantasy scorer. He's not their first choice hooker for a reason, but he's taken the opportunity by the neck here, and he's playing pretty decent footy. The fantasy scores are inconsistent, but 454K for a guy you can probably expect to play 80 minutes at hooker, just keep him. Just hang on. Like, he's available at hooker and half for you as well, so you can move him around. Team next week's going to be tough. You want to keep him. Like we talked about, all those halves who aren't going to be available. If you've got Hynes and maybe a couple of Bulldogs players or someone from the Tigers even, you probably don't have anyone from the Tigers. I mean, maybe Wakeham. That would have been a good move. But yeah, no, I hang on to Phoenix Crossland. Next guy here is Jermaine Hopgood. And look, I put him here because I don't think he's a buy. I think it's too late to buy Jermaine Hopgood. He'll score well for you this week. Matterson being in the halves, it helps him a lot. But next week, Alfie Ngaui's back on the bench. Matterson will be back on the bench. Junior will be back in the team. RCG's back in the team. Sean Lane's on the extended bench this week. He'll be back next week. There's just a lot of guys coming back. And Jermaine Hopgood has relied heavily on huge minutes to score well. He's not scoring well in those games where he plays 50 minutes. So I wouldn't be buying him. But if I had him, I'd hold on for this week. And I'd hold on until the wheels fell off a bit. And then maybe wait one more week just with the injuries Parramatta have had. Probably keep him for round 19, to be honest. That's probably what I'd be thinking of doing, but I wouldn't be buying him right now. That's the key thing at 776K. Last guy here is Nicho Hynes. And look, if you don't have him, he's a buy. He's the biggest buy in the world if you don't have him. Like, best captain option going around. Look, it's either him or, you could throw Joey Manu into the mix as well. He's playing fullback this week. We love that for fantasy. But for Nicho Hynes, 963K, the price doesn't mean anything because he's the best player in fantasy. And I say that because Nathan Cleary's out injured for another 5 weeks. So Nicho Hynes is outright the best player in fantasy for the next month of footy. You can get him. He plays both remaining major buy rounds. He doesn't play round 17. But he's Nicho Hynes. The captain scores he's going to show off for you this week are worth it. He posted 62 points last week in a game where he played pretty rough footy. The Sharks got dusted by the Storm, 54-10. He still scored 60. So, yeah, I'd take a drink on that one because, he's a fantastic fantasy option. Then the traps. So these are the guys we'd steer clear from. And look for the traps. First one here is Jason Taumalolo. Now, if you're an OG fantasy player like me, and by that I mean just an old prick, thinks about names a bit too much. You see that Taumalolo name and you think, 549K. I could be tempted on that one. Don't be tempted. Don't be tempted. Look, Peyton has destroyed Taumalolo's fantasy appeal. I'm not saying Peyton had a great year last year as a coach. He's having a rough one this year. He's changed a lot of how Taumalolo is playing, but as far as fantasy goes, it's just not working for Taumalolo. His scores were on decline, and he had the injury. He's coming back this week. You might think it's a prime time to buy him. I just don't like him as a pod. I don't see the upside. He doesn't have that explosion of a guy like Nelson Asofa-Solomona, who has that low downside like Taumalolo, has a lot more upside and is just a lot more exciting for me than Taumalolo. So I'd be steering clear. Tyrone Peachey, look, I always get questions about Peachey whenever he's named to start. 402K, it sounds nice, and he's a guy who's been around for a long time, so everyone thinks, this is the breakout year. It's not the breakout year. I love Tyrone Peachey. I think he's a fantastic footy player, and I have a soft spot for Dean Witters back in the day, and those explosive bench utility types who didn't really have a position, just came on the field and just played footy. Peachey's one of those guys. Really like him.
Wouldn't be buying him in fantasy. You won't get the spot. Crichton will come back and just don't do it to yourself. Jamin Salmon's the next guy. Salmon's 220k, so you might think, starting half of Penrith 220k, and that's what I've been saying. Starting half of Penrith is a good thing. Not a good thing for Salmon. Salmon's not a guy who kicks the ball much. He's not going to keep that spot. He's not really a genuine half necessarily. He's a bit more of a utility, and he comes along and play in the back row for Penrith a lot of the time. So, do you really want a weak-gutted dog in your team? With Salmon, it's going to be 1 week. He could score well this week. If you're in a draft league and you're desperate, I would not be shocked if he scored 50 for you this week. But he's going to be scoring 9s and 10s for the rest of the year for you, because he'll be on that bench playing 7 minutes for Scott Sorensen or Zach Hosking or someone like that, and you just don't want that headache in your team for the rest of the year. So just don't do it to yourself. Dylan Lucas is another guy here. Look, he scored okay last week. He came in for Lachlan Fitzgibbon last week, and he comes in for Tyson Frizzell this week, who's playing Origin. There could be, there's sometimes injuries that come out of Origin that give opportunities to guys like Dylan Lucas. I wouldn't be buying him and counting on something like that, though. 248k sounds nice for a starting back rower on a team that's scoring a lot of points in Newcastle. Just don't do it, though. There's too much downside. He'll probably be pretty ambiguous and sort of fade into the background this year, so I wouldn't be doing it. And last guy is Dejan Arce, and look, talk about passing the eye test. So again, I'm contradicting myself. Eye test, fantasy test, right? Eye test, Arce looked fantastic last week. He dived on loose balls. He was very physical. He ran straight over the top of Ockenbaugh and someone else on that Bulldogs right edge, and looked great to see Parramatta destroy the Dogs. We love to see it. Love to hate the Bulldogs, but also, respect the boys. They're a great club, but they're even better to beat. So, look, for Arce, he looked fantastic. As a Para fan, I'm stoked that he's there. As a fantasy prospect, I am not interested at all. Like 485k, that's the price that he is for a reason. Like he's that caliber of player. He's not kicking the ball much. He might kick it a bit more this week. He's not sort of the lead playmaker. He's going to play alongside Moses a lot of the time. Gutho is also a bit of a half. He steals a lot of try assists. Like even guys like Matterson, Junior Paulo, Jermaine Hopgood, Sean Lane when he's in, like the back rowers and some of the middle forwards, Parramatta steal try assists and attacking stats. So for Arce, skip that one. Maybe look at him for Supercoach if you're desperate, but I don't rate him as a fantasy prospect. I think he had a great game last week and he scored, I think it was 39 points. So he's a hard skip. Anyway, look, that's the fantasy wrap-up for round 16. There's a lot of interesting guys here. Look, if you're a head-to-head coach, a couple of those cash cows are interesting just to make some money. But other than that, you're probably skipping a lot of these options. You're probably waiting next week to see what happens. If you're an overall coach, grab some of those round 16 players. Look at round 17. That's the piece of advice I'm going to give you. Look at the round 17 team list. Let me know in the comments how you're looking for this week, how many players you have to play this week, and who you're going to be captaining this week as well. For me, it's Nico Hynes, but I could be convinced to go Joey Manu. Anyway,